Welcome to this week's episode of What's at Stake. We're your hosts, Bryan DeAngelis, a partner here at Penta.
And I'm Ylan, Managing Director at Penta.
And we're here the morning after the State of the Union to talk with our colleague, Kevin Madden, senior partner at Penta, who has served as a senior strategist and spokesman on at least 3 presidential campaigns. And most notably the Romney for President campaign, of course, in 2012. And will help us break down how President Biden did last night. So, Kevin, we're here Friday morning during what will be a pretty historic election year, and there's a lot to unpack. We'll do a little recapping of last night's speech, and we'll get into how effective moments like this are or maybe aren't for the president. But would love maybe to just start. How did you think Biden did yesterday?
Well, look, I think first you have to always judge these on performance first and then substance second. I think, let me get to the substance part first. I think if you read the speech and how the president and the White House were essentially sort of trying to micro-target their way to a better position with the voters that are really going to make or break whether or not he has a second term. I think It was very good, right? Healthcare, the economy, had to confront the issue of immigration because it's the number one issue in the country right now. You go down that entire recitation of the laundry list of policies, I'd give it like an A-. Like it was a very well-crafted speech, and I was reading it as he was giving it. But because I was reading it as he was giving it, I give it a C- on the performance. It was a very halting performance. He actually kind of stepped on some of the best lines, particularly at the end. I think at the beginning he reinforced some of people's concerns about the age issue, but then I'd say he got a lot stronger throughout the debate. Throughout the speech, and he had some really good moments. And I think oftentimes the performance is sort of atomized into these moments, where he was actually parrying some of the criticism and the catcalling from the audience and using it to his advantage. I was joking that it reminded me of a stand-up comic who's finds the heckler and then just starts making fun of the heckler which in order to get a few laughs from the audience. And I think the audience at home kind of gave him points for that. So I'd give it a C+, performance on the performance level. But then, my ultimate criticism is do these things really move the needle?
Right.
And I don't believe they really do.
Well, let's get to that in a minute. Ylan, I want to get your thoughts too. I mean, I would give this probably an A-, and part of it overall. Yeah. And that's part of it because politics is such an expectations game, and everybody, I was talking to folks around the office, but all week leading up to last night's speech, it was is this guy going to make it through the speech? Yeah. The expectations were just on the floor, and he came out guns a-blazing, nailed, to your point, 3 big campaign issues right away, going after January 6th, jumping on abortion, which I know women's rights will be a huge issue. And then to the age question, that back and forth with some of the hecklers showed him still having that ability to be quick on his feet, to engage. I thought it was really impressive. But
I agree with you. I mean, if he's being graded on a curve here, right, then I would agree with you that he, got an A-, maybe even a B, because the expectations were so low to begin with. And not only did he make it through the speech, first of all, he took his time coming out for the speech because he was so busy glad-handing, taking selfies with members of Congress, right? Doing that surprise face when he saw Marjorie Taylor Greene with the Trump hat on. So he had a lot of moments. The whole outfit. She was styling. So even just the walk up there, he was trying to show that he is someone who can last, right? And he gave a speech which was over an hour long, and then he was glad handing again and stayed so late in the chamber that they actually turned the lights off, right? When he was still shaking hands, which I thought was kind of incredible.
I didn't see that.
So if he wanted to show that he's someone who has a candidate who has staying power, I think he succeeded in that. I do agree with you, Bryan, that I thought it was unusual that he didn't start with the economy, which is what I would have expected. We saw today that you have hiring in the past month of 275,000 jobs, surpassing expectations. The economy has been more resilient than everyone has expected, even economists. but it's not translating down to the voters. And so I thought that his decision to move the economy to essentially third place, in his speech behind democracy and behind reproductive rights was a signal that this is not going to be a galvanizing issue, right? At best, it's going to be an issue that doesn't cause him to lose voters. It's not going to, he can't shoot himself in the foot. You don't want to have a recession. Obviously, that would be bad, but it's not something that's going to motivate people to turn out for him in November.
I wanted to ask you both about this point because I sort of struggled internally last night as a, I don't know, congressional traditionalist or maybe having some nostalgia. My first reaction was very political speech. And unlike a lot of other State of the Unions, I was like, this is his convention speech. And as the night went on, I was also like, this is 2024. This is the reality we live in now in the state of our politics. So kind of good for him. Good move to get those early viewers, hit those key points before we get into the economy and tax issues and what's coming up on the agenda.
It's an inherently political ritual.
Right.
So I think it made sense from a strategy standpoint to drop the pretense and try and say, well, I'm going to be very apolitical here. I think you had to, especially given the expectations, like you had to embrace the fact that this was going to be a very political moment. I think the traditionalist in me as well, like having worked up there on the Hill, I hate that it's become this circus where people are interrupting and, trying to have a political colloquy, a chaotic political colloquy back and forth.
I mean, a decade ago, we talked about Joe Walsh and you lie for weeks.
Joe Walsh is different. If Joe Walsh was there, Joe Wilson, Rep Joe Wilson from South Carolina.
Right.
But
it happened 5 times last night. It's just normal.
We are never going back.
Yeah.
And the long shadow of Congressman Joe Wilson will be with us forever. Every single State of the Union from here on out will have some level of interruption there because, we're just at that stage now where the people know that it's a concentrated moment to grab attention for themselves, and they will. And the simple fact that they were all taking selfies on the way in also demonstrates that the process and the pageantry of the entrance of the leader of the free world to deliver the speech, it's all gone.
I love that
digital
part
media
of it.
Now.
If you know, but to get those seats, you got to be there like hours in advance. Like members are getting in there in the morning, and it's Marjorie Taylor Greene and others that want that.
The clickbait crowd.
Yeah, clickbait crowd. You're right. Yeah,
Kevin, you bring up an interesting point. So you said earlier that this doesn't move the needle for the president, right? That this has just become such a expected speech. There was no news that was broken tonight. But do you think it moves the needle for anybody else? I'm thinking about Joe Wilson. Did it move the needle for him and sort of his star power? Did it move the needle for Mike Johnson at all? Did it move the needle for Kamala Harris? It certainly did for Nancy Pelosi when she, ripped up the speech.
No, and no. And no. But let me explain, because I think it's a good question because, I think it worked for Joe Wilson only if you adapt the idea that there's no such thing as bad press. Now, if we go back to that time, I remember getting a call from a friend of mine who was the consultant for Joe Wilson. He's like, hey, we need your help and advice. Like they knew that there was some fallout after that event. I had to go up there and sort of help my friend and Congressman Joe Wilson sort of manage that fallout back then. So it was not necessarily a net positive. I think today, all of these folks are convinced that it's a net positive because they only care about the world of conservative media and the feedback loop that they get on social media from the most vocal animated parts of the base. But the bigger picture on this, does this move the needle for anybody? The data shows that presidents only get maybe a 2-point bump out of this and that it's fleeting. And the bigger challenge, I think, is you have this ritual that everybody hypes for 2 days beforehand and they hype all day the day of, and then it happens, but it washes out of the news cycle very quickly in the next 48 hours. I think this was particularly an issue with Trump but Trump did this to himself. He'd have a great speech and everybody boy, he really stuck to the script. And remember Van Jones's famous comical statement about he became president tonight? Right. And then maybe 12 hours later, Trump had invented an entirely new news cycle with a new gaffe or new scandal or a new attack. And it was all of the goodwill of the speech was gone. And I don't think Biden necessarily is destined to step on his own news here. But like everybody who said, boy, maybe he's not as old as we think he is, or boy, he was really together with and on message. Sure, for a speech that he had prepared for the last 2 weeks that was on a teleprompter and is pretty much an unfettered sort of opportunity to talk directly to the American people. Let's see him do that twice a week for the next 6 months, all the way until Election Day. I don't think it will happen. And he'll do something in the next week to reinforce people's concerns about his age and his ability to really execute a disciplined message.
Can I push is the wrong word, but I want to dig deeper into that question, because I agree with you on the substance and issues. Like, these are fleeting moments, and especially this year, this isn't an issue or vision for the future kind of campaign. And maybe it's the social media world we live in. It is the biggest audience he'll get again till probably the convention and then the debates. And did he do enough to, okay, I'm a voter that doesn't pay attention, but I will vote. And all I've heard is the guy can't do anything because he's too old. He can't think straight. He can't move. Wow, I watched him. Clearly that was exaggerated. Does that stick in their mind?
No, State of the Unions are like cotton candy. They melt on contact. In this news environment where everything is done in 240 characters on people's smartphones, and we live in a 24-second news cycle, not a 24-hour news cycle. So I think the effects of this will largely be gone within the next 3 days. Here is where it can matter. You look at the large frame that President Biden and the White House put around the 2024 elections and what's at stake. And to Ylan's point earlier about talking about the economy, bringing up the abortion IVF issue.
Right.
Those are going, and then also the immigration issue, which I think right now is a huge challenge, obstacle for the president with many voters, but it's going to make or break whether or not he can address that will make or break whether or not he's reelected. In those swing areas around the country where the economy, the abortion issue, and the immigration issue will serve as the backdrop for swing voters' decisions. So he set the frame very favorably and positively for what he can do over the next, or from here all the way until November. But can he execute a performance like he did last night 2 to 3 times a week, because that's the news cycle that we're in, 2 to 3 times a week, every week, all the way to November? I am a huge skeptic on that point.
Yeah. And because if that happens, if there's a gaffe, the social media environment we live in, the hyper-partisan we live in, that just magnifies it as much, in your opinion, as a State of the Union address. So it erases.
We're like, there are very few guarantees in politics, but one of the guarantees is that in this election, and it could be either candidate given the age issue for both, we're going to have a wholly blank moment related to the age question. And you will not be sitting there wondering, oh, but he gave such a great State of the Union speech back in March.
Right. Right.
Well, that will not be a central consideration for anybody making their decision in November.
Well, and also, even if he does get a 2-point bump out of this, 2 points when you're at an all-time low in your approval ratings is nothing. So he has I do agree with you that he has definitely an uphill, has a climb uphill here. And Trump has proven that he's a master at manipulating all of those individual media moments to maximum effect, right? Even when when Truth Social was down last night, right, he still managed to find a way to put his message out there and to galvanize his own voters.
To be fair, the political B12 shot here was the way that the President Biden was perceived as on offense and came off as a fighter too, not necessarily the swing voters, but like the base Democrat activist right now that is not really enthusiastic about a Biden campaign or the Biden candidacy. They got what they wanted last night. So that was always a problem, which is like one of the reasons that some of the numbers are so low is that your most vocal activist in the Democratic Party is just not excited. They probably came out of last night more excited than they were before. And so there is some utility here to the speech and the performance that the president gave last night.
That's a good point. And thinking about some other audiences in that same context, it probably got Democratic members back excited about him. And
everybody up there who's a little worried was like a little less worried today.
Right. And I wonder, maybe a question for you, Ylan, does it change the way the media has been thinking about Biden? Like have been doing a lot of the framing around the age. Does this erase that? Maybe not till the next gaffe, but enough till then.
Yeah, I think there was pretty uniform consensus in the headline. You saw the word fiery, used quite a bit. Robust, he was pugilistic even, right? So I think that there was a unified narrative around his performance last night, which I think is probably what the White House wanted. He wanted to come off as a fighter. So I think that's probably good for him. But I do agree with Kevin, I just don't think it's going to necessarily last that long, because he also did make mistakes, by the way, during the speech last night. No one's going to Moscow to get their prescription drugs. And he sort of caught himself when he said that.
Right.
Well, it's just Moscow, Idaho, but
it happens.
Well, here's the thing, too. Then I always ask this for folks who don't necessarily follow politics the way we do every single day is you have to look at these questions in the terms of fundamentals and atmospherics. And so much what drives cable news coverage is the atmospheric. So as Ylan was like referencing, everybody's like, oh, what a fiery debate and an energized Democratic base. That's really about the atmospherics. The fundamentals are the age concern is still very, very central to a lot of people's considerations about this president. And then the state of their dissatisfaction on the economy, which Ylan also referenced earlier, that is still a fundamental issue. Now, Fed action and macroeconomic indicators are sort of potentially going to change that over the course of the next couple of months. But just remember this, like one of the other fundamentals is that public opinion starts to essentially set in by August, and there's not much after Labor Day that's really going to change the trajectory of the public's opinion. Those are probably the things that if I'm a strategist on either of these campaigns, that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I was reading a memo I think a mutual friend of ours, Doug Sosnick, put out last week. You think of the campaign in those kind of three periods. There's sort of this February to June period where you're forming your opinion on the incumbent. You've got the period of the summer with the conventions, and then maybe something happens in the debates or October surprise. But like to your point, opinions are pretty formed.
Yeah. David Axelrod told me this, and I had to learn it the hard way. He's like, there aren't many ads after Labor Day that are going to make a difference.
Right.
And you know what they did in March, April, May of 2012? They defined Mitt Romney with lots and lots and lots of ads in lots of swing states.
So that's kind of my question. What does the White House, the campaign, do over the next 3 months? Did they learn anything about their candidate last night to, change the way they're kind of approaching things?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, they have to recognize that this election is going to come down to about 300,000 voters across 5 states. And in those 5 states, like very defined regions. So right now they have to go out and think about what the swing vote, what's really driving the swing voters there. Your average swing voter right now is like somewhat pessimistic about the state of the economy. Maybe they see some green shoots, but they're just the question on whether we're better off 4 years ago is probably right now we're not working in their favor.
Or 3 years ago.
They are, and they're right, and they're very worried about immigration and border security. You cannot be dismissive about that. You have to answer it. And I think that's the reason that the president finally went to the border.
Yeah. Because
they recognize that. But they also know that at the backdrop is going to be, if you're looking at the average swing voter, which is a suburban woman who's sort of a maybe independent, but very pragmatic on fiscal, or maybe conservative or pragmatic on fiscal issues, but very sort of more progressive on social issues. The abortion and IVF issue is going to be at the backdrop of their consideration on which candidate. And so focusing on those 3 issues intently is in those regions is going to be their focus. And if you think about like the starter's pistol of the general election being the day after Super Tuesday, if you look at the way Trump courted Haley voters and how Biden courted Haley voters, which is like Trump insulted Haley, right? And like, criticized her for staying in as long as she did. And Biden's like, I want to be the president for Republicans, independents, and Democrats. You know? I'd have to say that in the first couple of days, he's got a better. That campaign is more oriented towards winning those voters over right now than Trump is.
Yeah,
Kevin, the one issue you didn't mention in terms of what's top of mind for swing voters is the idea of democracy, right? So I thought it was interesting, and certainly Republicans were pointed this out, that Biden started the State of the Union not talking about our union, but talking about Ukraine, right? And
national security.
And there is a direct line, to our place in the world, how we support our allies, et cetera. But does that play into the swing voter calculation at all when they think about, is it Biden? Is it Trump? Biden tried to draw a very clear distinction between the way that he felt America should engage with its allies and the way that America should conduct itself here at home. That is very different from the picture that
first of all,
Trump
I think it's a good question. I think it was smart for him to start there because I think he knows the moral dilemma that many folks are dealing with on the Ukraine issue and the Ukraine funding issue in the Republican Party. Like there's a division inside the Republican Party. Like who are we as a party if we can't do this? And you have so many far right conservatives that are resistant to it right now, which is odd given the past devotion to this issue as a key principle of the Republican platform. And I think he wanted to drive a little bit of a truck through the division inside the party. And he wanted to, I think he basically wanted to say, I know that you're not doing the right thing. And so do the American public. And I thought that was an interesting political gesture for him. And it worked in his favor. Does it matter with swing voters? National security, foreign policy broadly falls into the question of can we achieve stability? Can we have American leadership that is going to guarantee more stability and peace around the globe and harmony around the globe? And so I think in that question, it will play into that broader question of how it plays into the swing voter consideration. Democracy, though, I do not believe it is a motivator. I think the democracy issue, which is the January 6th question and the future of our institutions, I think that plays directly into his most active Democratic base. Mm-hmm. For them, they have to have this election reframed with higher stakes involved around the democracy question in order for them to get excited, because they're not excited about Joe Biden's history as being a heart-driven progressive.
Yeah.
And so they question that. But if it comes down to a very clear choice between Joe Biden, who's going to promise to be a steward of democracy, and what they see as a huge threat from Trump, that's what gets them to turn out on Election Day.
Yeah, I thought the three first issues, those two you just discussed, and then abortion strung together, were just talking to those Haley voters, those suburban moms in those 6 districts. It's America's leadership, January 6th, and the chaos, and you've got to love your country, whether you're on the winning side or losing side, right into women's rights. I mean, that was just speaking to that.
The best way to describe the Haley voter right now as a swing voter is like a conscientious objector. They just do not want to subscribe to this type of Republican view of the world on the issue of smart power, foreign policy, national security.
Yeah.
And they're parked and undecided right now. And they're going to make or break this election, I think.
Yeah. And going back to my question about what the White House learned, I mean, I saw the best Biden when he was in that back and forth engagement. I would stick him in town hall meetings in all of those suburbs for the next 2 months.
As long as they were 20 minutes long.
Right. That's the best
1
Biden.
hour, because the best Biden is not the news conference Biden in the, Rose Garden.
But is it also potentially the worst Biden?
It is.
Right? It's the best and the worst Biden. So they're
It's
nervous.
the off the script. It's off the script and exposed to the elements. The State of the Union is not really exposed to the elements. It's pageantry. It's political pageantry at its highest levels. It's a ritual, and you actually get afforded a little bit more of a leeway because of it. I know it's hard and it's difficult, and with this Congress nowadays, it's not an easy crowd, but very different from these rope line interactions or a gruel. What I would say is a grueling 50-minute town hall interview where you're exposed to the elements and you do not know what question is coming up and you do not have that speech line written down. So I'd be careful what you wish for, Mr. DeAngelis.
Yeah. Well, speaking of careful what you wish for, and maybe antiquated traditions, when will, rising stars realize the rebuttal is a terrible idea?
You guys have been talking about the suburban mom swing voter, and clearly Katie Britt's rebuttal was an attempt to appeal to that demographic. I really wanted to like it. I really did, because she is my peer. We're the same age. We both got kids, live in the minivan life in the suburbs, but it was just overly dramatic, overacted, overly produced, overly rehearsed.
A roller coaster of emotions.
Every single one played out in her face, over the time.
I think it was poorly written.
Yeah.
And these things are collaborative process. I doubt in many ways that she wrote it herself.
Right.
But she probably had some good instincts on the topics and what she wanted to get across. But I think it came off as poorly written. I also think it had had two audiences. The first audience was like the Bible study group of Republican women.
Right.
And then Donald Trump.
Yes. Yeah.
And with those two audiences, I think they had very different reactions. And I think they're going to have an even more positive reaction given the backlash, because the sort of Republican antibody effect, right, which is like to start to defend themselves against the left, will happen. And there's some very, very harsh criticism on the left on this. And but I think look, everybody has said everybody who knows Katie Britt has said she's an incredible political talent.
Things, yeah.
She's an extremely adroit lawmaker and deal maker up on Capitol Hill. Like everybody up there knows. She was a chief of staff for Senator Shelby for a really long time. She knows how the system works. So, and I think she'll get another shot at repurposing her political profile.
Do you think she's still in the mix? Like, did she do enough with Trump to still be in that kind of VP rising star?
Yes, because we're like talking about the political B12 shot, like with the base,
the audience of one.
And the base. There's going to be people inside the Republican Party that will say, because of the backlash that she got, will say she needs to be She needs to be your VP. So I think she had more admirers and has more support in that process now than she did before.
Yeah. What did you think of the kitchen? The idea of putting her in the kitchen to deliver the speech. I've seen some criticism of it, of, why are you signaling that a woman's place is in the kitchen, even when she's, speaking to the biggest audience in the country, right? But at the same time, I did feel like it was very intimate and kind of folksy. I'm torn on that one.
Yeah, I got the, and maybe they should have leaned into it more. I got the kitchen table.
We say that all the time, right? Oh, the kitchen table issues.
And she was talking
and
about
she referenced
those issues.
That.
Yeah. So I kind of agree with that strategy. I saw especially the left kind of go nuts about women in the kitchen, but that's probably one audience.
I think really good instincts, bad execution. I also think that this SNL cold open, which is a guarantee.
Yeah,
we all agree on that.
Yeah.
It's a guarantee. If I were writing the skit, I would have somebody walk behind her and like start going through the fridge.
Yeah. And look at the ice cream in the fridge. Right. Look at the ice cream in the freezer.
Bathrobe, going through, getting ice cream out, and a Miller High Life, and just walking out. They're going, "What are you doing? Who are you talking to?"
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I the part about it that started to not resonate for me was when she started talking about, the border crisis and the deaths and the violence from her kitchen. And that to me felt very discordant. There were other parts where she, kind of hit it and had that folksy feel, but, trying to talk about something so serious and literally deadly felt very awkward.
Likewise, when she went down the road of the Chinese Communist Party being here, it just, you lost that kitchen table.
Yeah, the background worked against her in that. And and again, that's why I think it was poorly written.
Yeah.
It wasn't
well again, back to my question. I mean, I don't know why anyone does these rebuttals.
I had such high hopes for this one.
Yeah, but I can't remember the last good one.
I also said if anybody's going to get this, Marco Rubio is going to get it.
Right.
If anybody's going to,
I think
the last good one of just to tell you where the Republican Party's gone. Christine Todd Whitman in 1990 whatever.
I was going to say
was
it has
the last
to be 20
good one.
years.
She gave it to the to the at the State House in New Jersey, and it was live to an audience, and it just was a perfect sort of contrast. That might be the last good one that I remember.
Yeah. I think if I was advising a member and they called
or
me
Bob
next
McDonald,
year,
Bob McDonald too in like 2010.
say no thanks.
Yeah.
Don't take that call.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, we'll wrap it up there, and we'll keep an eye on the polls and everything, and we'll see if this,
as always,
worked or didn't work, and how antiquated the State of the Union might or may not be. But Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Great. And to our listeners, remember that you can like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and follow us on X at Penta GRP and on LinkedIn at Penta Group. As always, thanks for listening to What's at Stake.